Welcome, thank you. I've still got people coming in. File in, take a seat. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming along. I'm glad to see that other people think individuals matter as well, because as Lara identified, that's kind of my personal passion and it's the work that I do. I am a workplace psychologist. I'm not an organisational psychologist. It's slightly different. I specialise in helping individuals, particularly at work, and sometimes they're the leaders, so they have that flow-on or ripple effect impact. Often they're professionals and senior people. Sometimes they're graduates. Could be anybody, really doesn't matter. So I often work with individuals and with groups, but very much focusing on the individuals and what we can do to help those individuals and therefore help our organisations to thrive and flourish. So I could talk and talk and talk, but I know I don't have time, so I'm going to really, as I'll kind of set the pace this morning, or at lunchtime. So my question to you, because I asked lots of questions, my question to you is, if we were to put a dot up there on the screen for every individual in your organisation, how many dots would there be? Hands up if it's like 1 to 10 dots. Yeah, okay. Hands up if it's 100 dots. 1,000 dots? 10,000 dots? Maybe tens of thousands of dots. Yeah? Okay, so we're talking about big numbers, and every single one of those dots, importantly, and we can cut that data lots of different ways. We could divide it up that way according to gender, and each one of those would be, a number of dots as identified by those individuals themselves. We could divide the dots up according to the languages that people speak in their organisations or at home, and they're currently, I think as of the 2016 census, the top languages spoken in Australian homes. We could divide the dots up according to education level. Yeah, we've got lots of different ways. If we take all of those dots, all of those tens of thousands of dots, those data points, we can divide them up. We can cut that data in lots and lots of different ways. But no matter how we do that, each of those dots is still an individual. Yeah? You are one of those dots. You are one of those data points. And you matter as individuals. Yeah, and we have an opportunity, if we can start to really think about those data points, think about those dots as individuals, as yourselves, because you represent them, you are one. If we can start to actually look at how do we help those individuals to thrive and flourish, then we've got an opportunity to also create thriving and flourishing workplaces. And beyond that, we've got an opportunity to create thriving and flourishing communities. And I reckon that's probably a purpose worth fulfilling. Walking into the furniture. But firstly, what is it to flourish? What does it actually mean to flourish? Adrian spoke this morning, I keep saying this morning because it feels like it was that long ago, it really wasn't, only a matter of an hour or so ago, about that intersection of performance and well-being and why that's important. And I practice in the area of positive psychology. Have people heard of positive psychology? Hands up if you have. A few people? Oh, quite a few people. Excellent. Okay, so that's the area I practice in. And positive psychology is the science of optimal human functioning. So for the last 20 years or so, the scientists working in this area have been exploring what is it that helps us to thrive and flourish as individuals, what helps us to establish the best relationships that we can have, to help create a sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. What is it that helps us to fulfil our goals, to pursue meaning, to pursue avenues of achievement? What is it that helps us to feel and thrive at our best in any of the pursuits that we pursue, including our work? And so what we know from this 20 years or so now of research is that optimal human functioning is really just feeling good and functioning well. Almost forgot for a moment there. I could give you a far more fancy scientific definition, but it's really at its essence, it's really feeling good and functioning well. So it's an opportunity to be our best selves. Yeah, anyone in the room feel like they're thriving and flourishing? Yeah, we've got a few of us, a few people going, oh, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. And why is it important that we have individuals and therefore workplaces and organisations that thrive and flourish? Well, from an organisational point of view, these are some of the outcomes that we've found from PosPsych, and particularly positive organisational scholarship, which is a subset. So it's actually looking at positive psychology in our organisations and in our workplaces. This is some of the findings. So we know that people, when they're thriving, when our employees are thriving, they report higher job satisfaction. They experience more frequent positive emotion at work. They have greater energy. They're more likely to be intrinsically motivated. They experience greater harmony with others. They exhibit more pro-social behaviour. They're more likely to help and to cooperate and collaborate. They find more meaning and purpose in their work. And they're more likely to dedicate themselves to the task that they're pursuing and the outcome. So they're all findings that we've got from the science that's come out of this last 20 years or so. If we can help our individuals to thrive and to flourish, they're the sort of outcomes we're looking for. And I think they probably almost stand alone as worthwhile outcomes to pursue, especially when you start to think of what the flow-on effects, what the ripple effects might be to an organisation or even a work team if you've got a team full of people who are able to deliver on that on any given day. Yeah? But there's another reason why it's useful to actually start looking at helping our individuals to thrive and flourish at work. And it has to do with the culture. So we're starting to understand that the culture in our organisations is an emergent property of complex adaptive systems. Our organisations are complex, particularly, and I'm guessing it's likely the case for all of you, you are dealing with knowledge, you are dealing with data, you're dealing with information, you are dealing with people who bring themselves to work and their minds to work, and that's probably largely it. And you're relying on people to be able to be at their best in order to be able to bring all of that to contribute in the way that you need them to. Yeah. And so if you've got people doing that, if you think of your organisation as a system and the inputs to that system are all of these people who are coming to work and they're pinging off each other. And if they're pinging off each other in a positive way, you know, if they're able to kind of pick up on each other's positive attitudes, their intrinsic motivation, their tone, their mood, their behaviour, and that's coming from a place of, it always gets tricky, thriving and flourishing, then what you get is an emergent property, a culture that's bigger than the sum of those individual parts. Yeah, you get a culture that's positive. There's a multiplier effect that happens within this systems type model that helps create those cultures. Who here's worked in a negative, crappy, toxic workplace culture before? Yeah? How does that feel? You feeling like your best self? No? Do you want to go to work? No, not particularly, because the same thing happens if you bring enough people, even if it's a small team, but you've got that toxic kind of vibe to it, the same thing happens. You get a multiplier effect, yeah? So if we can start to help the individuals to come to work as their best selves, to come to work, bringing that motivation, that positive vibe, that good attitude, that tone, the behaviour, their thoughts, even down to the individual level of our thoughts, if we can bring that stuff and create that multiplier effect, then we've got an amazing opportunity there to create the kind of culture that we want in our organisations and allow people to really work and operate at their best. I keep backing into that. Okay. So both Al and Adrian talked this afternoon, about the role of leaders in helping to use the data that you've got, use it for good, and hopefully this is sort of filling in some of those gaps in there, particularly that Al identified about, you know, how do we get to the wellbeing piece? How do we get to the sort of data that we need at an individual granular level to be able to, tell the stories and deliver on the outcomes that we're looking for? And so there's definitely an opportunity here for a top-down, a leadership-driven role. As Simon Sinek says, the leader sets the tone, and we know that's important. It's role modelling. But we've also got an opportunity to deliver from a bottom-up point of view as well, because if we can create it, we can actually help our individuals, and it'll be up to you to think about how you do that in your organisations. But if you're starting to look at, you know, how do we actually get to know what individuals need and how do we help them to thrive as individuals, then we're taking both a top-down and a bottom-up approach. Okay. I have no idea what time we started, Lara, so I don't know what time we're supposed to finish. Okay, so I've got a little question for you then, because I'm just going to take advantage of not knowing what the time. Just have a think for a moment about a role or a project or an event, and it doesn't have to be in your role now, it might be in the past. Think about a time when you have been really energised, engaged, inspired, motivated and satisfied by your work. Yeah, just ponder that for a second. Okay. Anyone like to share what they were doing or what it was that contributed to that sense of satisfaction in their role? Can anyone give me an example? Yes, thank you.
Just coming back into the new year, just researching in the employee experience space, lots of, I guess, interests and trends in the market. So researching just got me obviously a bit excited.
Yeah, okay. And what did the excitement feel like? I can see it emanating from you as you say that. So.
Just motivating. I think just the opportunity, or the opportunities in that space was exciting. You know, just that creativity.
Yep.
That you can add to it. Probably what got me excited.
Yep, so it's exciting, you felt creative, you're intrinsically motivated while you're engaged in the task. Did you have that experience of sort of getting so into it that time both disappears and stands still at the same time? Yeah, absolutely. So that's engagement at an individual level. We talk about employee engagement, but that's engagement at a personal level. Could somebody have stopped you doing that easily?
I'm highly distractible, so not when I was in that sort of space, because even if someone took me off to another path, I wouldn't come back.
Yep, and your mind was probably on it as well. Yep. Does that kind of depict for other people that experience that you've had in that same sort of way, just being so engaged in a task, being intrinsically motivated by it? You know, the individual difference here might be, you know, you might have been doing something with other people versus research, or you might have been doing something that served a community purpose, or it could be anything at all. But that is that thriving and flourishing in action, when we can help people to identify the tasks and how that contributes to, you know, how it plays to their strengths, how it contributes to a sense of meaning and purpose, how that kind of looks for an individual. That's what thriving and flourishing in action looks like. And so you can see if you've got people who are in that space, not every moment of every day because that's unrealistic, but if they're able to actually come to work in that space, if they're able to craft their roles, or you're able to help them craft their roles to be able to create that experience more often than not, you can start to see how that positive multiplier effect takes place. You can start to see how you can actually start to create a culture, a vibe, plus impact the lives of individuals. Okay. So, that was your turn. We've done that. Okay. So we're going to zoom in for a moment on one of those dots. And for argument's sake, we're going to call this dot Ellen. And we've got a bit of data we know about Ellen. So we know she's 47 years old. We know she identifies as female. We know that she's got a couple of university degrees. She's an English speaker, sadly only an English speaker. She's a consultant or podcaster. So we've got a bit of performance data that Lara mentioned earlier as well. So we know some pretty black and white stuff about Ellen, but we don't know what inspires her, what motivates her, what drives her, what gives her a sense of meaning and purpose in life, what energizes her, why she makes the decisions that she makes, why she engages with others in the way that she does. We don't know that stuff from this kind of data, but there's some tools from PosPsych that allow us to gather that sort of data. And I could have come at this from about 1,000 different angles, and I really had to cull down an awful lot of different ways in which we could have spoken about this. And I've picked 3 because they're reasonably quantifiable. They're also freely available, and they're all evidence-based. And the first of those is just looking at her strengths. Yeah. So are people aware of the VIA Strengths Survey? Yeah, a few people. So the Strengths Survey is one of the pillars, I suppose, of positive psychology. It looks at positive individual traits. So like a personality questionnaire that you might complete gives you a sense of the individual traits of somebody. This is really focusing in on what we know as positive individual traits. And there's 3 things that we know about positive, well, there's about 1,000 things we know, but there's 3 particular things. We know that when we're able to engage our positive individual traits, our strengths, then we are inherently motivated. We know that we are energised. We know that we are authentic, so we're feeling like this is who I am. When I'm actually able to engage my strengths, this is who I am, this is what I'm supposed to do, so it's that feeling of authenticity. And we know that you can almost, it's almost a case of, you can't stop me from doing this. Yeah, this is just so intrinsically who I am in a positive and authentic way that you can't stop me from doing it. So I'm going to stop talking about myself in the third person here. That's 3 of my top 5 strengths from the VIA survey, just to give you an example. Judgement, so making rational and logical choices, analytically evaluating ideas, opinions and facts, so it's a form of critical thinking. Yeah, and so individuals at work who have a top strength of judgment and are able to employ that as a strength have the opportunity, or are ideally suited to roles or opportunities to synthesise information, synthesise data. They may play the devil's advocate. They may be the person that you bring in to be able to say, you know what, we've got these sorts of ideas, can you just come at it from a different perspective for us and give us another way of perhaps thinking, is there something that we're missing here? And that's something that somebody with a strength of judgment is probably best suited to do. So you've got the benefit of having an individual because you've been able to identify that, and you've been able to help them identify it through using a tool like the VIA survey. So you get the benefit of being able to employ those skills, those strengths, those intrinsically motivated elements of an individual, but you are also contributing to the well-being of that individual at the same time. Because when she, or I, in this case, gets to do this sort of stuff, you can't stop me. You know, I'm in my happy place. Yeah, and we know that there's a well-being effect that's quantifiable, a well-being effect that flows from that for the individual. So it's a real contributor to thriving and flourishing. The other 2 there, I'll probably keep walking in front of the slides, don't I? The other 2 there are forgiveness, so extending understanding towards those who have wronged or hurt us, so let go. So somebody with the top strength of forgiveness, you could probably rely on in most cases to get along with most people, very unlikely to cause conflict, you know, isn't going to rock the boat, so good interpersonal relationships. Probably not the person to bring in if you do actually want to rock the boat a little bit, if you do actually want to cause a bit of a ruction, because they're not going to do it. Yeah? So knowing that about that person helps you again to craft, it helps them to craft their roles, to understand themselves, helps you as an organisation to be able to say, you know, this is a good person for this particular role, or maybe this is not the right person for this particular role. Curiosity is the third one, so being curious, asking the questions at all times. That is a list of all 24 of the strengths. And you'll see some of them are probably the kind of typical things that you might see when we talk about organisational or team strengths, you know, teamwork and leadership, love of learning, maybe, perseverance, those sorts of things. But we've also got things like love and hope and humility and spirituality and bravery, because this is what we need. You know, these are the 24, and there's lots of really interesting research. They looked at cultural differences, they looked at religious differences, they looked across, you know, the book, the manual that comes with this is about 700 pages, it's huge. You know, so there's a lot of science, there's a lot of really interesting philosophical as much as scientific research that goes behind that. But they are the 24 strengths, and we can help individuals, and I do on a very regular basis help individuals to identify what those strengths are and what that means for them to help them to thrive and to flourish. Okay, that was tool 1. Tool 2 is just values, yeah? And I say just values like it's a really simple thing. Who here could actually just state what their personal values are off the tops of their heads? I know you should be able to, Adrian. A couple of people can. Yeah, for many of us, it's not actually something we've perhaps given a huge amount of thought to. Certainly not something that we talk a lot about in workplaces. We talk about the workplace's values or the organisation's values. You know, we put them on posters and mouth mats and screensavers and all of that. But not very often do we actually start to explore what an individual's values are and where the match is between the individual's values and that workplace or that team's values, and what happens if those things don't match, because that can be a really uncomfortable place to be. And there's lots of different ways of looking at values and how we assess values. And the interesting thing about values, so definition there from Shalom Schwartz, guiding principles in our lives affecting our goals and our actions. So from a workplace point of view, that's really important because it is our goals that, well, our goals are the operationalisation of our values. So if I have a value of security, for example, I might be the kind of person who's going to work hard and buy a home and pay off the mortgage on that home because I want to feel secure, yeah? But if I don't have a value of security, that's not me particularly, my value might be an adventure, then I'm going to be spending all my spare cash, you know, on trips overseas and daredevil type exercises and activities. It drives our values, it drives our goals and our activities and our decisions in a really, really fundamental kind of way. And organisationally, that's exactly the same. So when we understand our values, or we give people the opportunity to explore and understand their values, we can help them to understand, and we can start to gather a bit of data on what is it that's going to motivate that individual, what's going to drive them. So one of the ways of exploring that, and again, this is from Shalom Schwartz's personal values inventory, I think it's called. I've got the exact name now, I can't remember off the top of my head. Presents it in a circumflex. Psychologists love circumflexes. And you can see, so we've got identified 9 different basic values there. Stimulation, self-direction, universalism, benevolence, conformity and tradition, security, power, achievement, and hedonism. And the aim behind the circumflex, the way it's presented like that, is because if you've got strong values, say, of self-direction, so that's one of my personal values, strong values is self-direction. It's why I forewent paid employment about 18 years ago and have worked as a consultant on my own ever since. I'm not very good at being told what to do. And you look at the opposite side of the circumflex. So for people who have a high value in self-direction, who want to be able to make their own decisions, who have control, who really enjoy and are motivated by the opportunity to lead themselves, to create their own lives, to do things the way they want to do them, and are not very good at being told what to do. Security sort of sits roughly in the opposite. So you tend to find that people don't have, the opposite set of values, if that makes sense. So helping individuals to understand that, so to take power as an example, if you're able to help an individual understand, and we do tend to think of power as a bit of a value-laden term, not usually in a good way, but if you've got a sense of power as a value, if that's a meaningful thing for you, if that's likely to direct your goals, direct your motivation, direct your activity, then you may be the kind of person who wants to climb the corporate ladder, who wants to be in control of people and resources. Yeah, that's important to you as an individual, and that's going to drive the decisions you make. It's going to drive your career path. It's going to drive the activities that you undertake potentially within your organisation, within your workplace. But if that's not at all a driver for you, if that's not a personal value for you, and you are far more motivated by the opportunity for self-direction or universalism. So universalism is actually akin to social justice. Yeah, so people have a strong sense of social justice, who are really motivated by a desire to create opportunities for equality and welfare for all people. You can see how that will play out differently in a workplace environment. If that's a driving force for them, they're going to make a different set of decisions. They're going to be motivated to undertake a different set of activities. And when we can help our individuals to understand that, and when we can gather a bit of data on this as an organisation, we have so much more power, so much more information to work with about how we match people with roles, or about how we help people to thrive and flourish, or about who we put in which particular project. It's tools and power and information both at an organisational and at an individual level. So there's several different ways of measuring values. That's one model. There's a questionnaire that goes with that. The very basic one's usually just a list that you've probably seen or perhaps filled in yourself, just a basic list of value descriptors, and you get to circle a few. And even that can be a really simple but very powerful activity. One of the things that I love to do with groups, if we're doing an activity like that, is actually get people to do their own individual set of values. They pick your top 5, and then we do a bit of a compare and contrast with others in the room to say, okay, they're your 5, but this person over here's got an entirely different 5. And if you've got a group who work together, you can automatically start a conversation around, oh yeah, I can see that in you. I can see that's why you love doing this, why you're always the one who organises morning tea for everyone, because one of your values is around connection and relationships. Yeah, or why you're suddenly, I've always wondered why, you were always motivated to, get ahead, and I don't really care that much. And it's just about this fundamental individual values difference. So I can start some really interesting conversations in workplaces. Some of the things that we know about knowing our values beyond just that individual level stuff is that it reduces our stress. It helps us to make decisions and solve problems. It can help us develop better health habits. probably all sorts of lifestyle habits, but health habits in particular. Knowing our values helps us to persist and persevere because we know why we're doing it. Values are really a big answer to that why question. Helps us to act more assertively because I know who I am, I know what I stand for, therefore I will put myself forward when I know that's important. Helps us to act with more compassion. Yeah, I have a value of love and kindness, and therefore I am going to try and act. And if I remind myself, if I know that about myself, I can remind myself of that, and then at a decision point or an action point, I'm able to step forward and act potentially with more compassion. We can make wiser and career and work choices, because we know who we are, and so we know where we want to go. We know ourselves, and we can develop a deep sense of personal belief or self-belief. So, strengths, values, and the third one I've got for you is a little different. It's a little harder to quantify, but it's very simple in the way that we do it, and I'm going to give you a chance to do it yourselves because this is fun. Oh, no, I'm not, because I'm going to show you really quickly. That's just a couple of examples of the sort of questions from the Schwartz Portrait Values Questionnaire. So thinking up new ideas and being creative is important to me. It's important for me to be rich and have a lot of money. I believe that every person in the world should be treated equally. I love surprises and always want to try something new. So it's a really simple questionnaire, like 15 questions in the short form, I think. Just helps people tap into that sort of stuff. Okay, so the third thing that I was going to talk about, or I am going to talk about, is purpose, meaning and purpose. So fascinating area currently in positive psychology, a lot of very interesting research being done into what it is to have a sense of meaning and purpose and how we obtain it. I'm not going to go through all of that kind of stuff because that'll kind of blow our minds a little bit. So just straight to the point, how can we actually start to tap in as individuals or help the individuals in our workplace to tap into what is our purpose? And it's as simple as what we call a 6-word purpose story, or that's what I call it. And it comes from a writing prompt that was started from Ernest Hemingway, who wrote these 6-word stories. And one of his 6-word stories was "For sale, baby shoes never worn." A huge amount of emotional impact from 6 little words, So they use this as a writing prompt for anybody who has a writing background. They use it as a writing prompt, come up with a story, because you have to be pretty damn clever to be able to come up with a story that has that amount of emotional impact in 6 words. And so we're using that now as a prompt to come up with a purpose statement. So I know, Adrian, I tried to compress yours into 6 words when you put the Benny Button vision up on it was close. I got it down to 7. That's mine. So help others live, learn and flourish. I didn't come up with the 6 words instantly. It took a little while to get to 6 words. But that basically underpins everything that I do personally and professionally. Everything that my podcast, my parenting, my work, the decisions that I make, the tasks that I take on, the consulting gigs that I take on, if they give me running sessions like this, if they give me an opportunity to help others to live, learn and flourish, then they feel authentic and they're worth doing as far as I'm concerned. So my little challenge for you in the last couple of minutes that we have is to see if you can come up with, if not a 6-word purpose statement, at least perhaps 6 words that you think are the reason for you doing what you do. And that might be work-related, but it may not be work-related. Hopefully, if you're really on the path to thriving and flourishing, it will encompass both. But just have a go for a couple of minutes, see if you can come up with 6 words that you think are meaningful and purposeful to you. Okay, does anyone feel they've nailed their 6-word purpose statement? No, okay, that's quite to be expected. It does take a little while. Has anyone got 6 words that they're reasonably, or even 5 or 7 or 8, doesn't matter, words that they're reasonably happy with? Yes. Anyone like to share them? Would you like to share yours?
Inspire professional purpose through astrological insight.
There you go. Inspire professional purpose through astrological insight. I reckon that inspire. Yeah, you've got 6 words there, and that forms a statement. Can you tell us about why that's meaningful to you?
I use astrology to connect people to their purpose.
Okay, There we go. So using astrology to connect. So that 6 words sounds like a pretty coherent purpose statement to you about helping individuals to use astrology to find a sense of purpose, professionally in particular? Yeah, professionally in particular. So there you go. We have a purpose statement. That's right. There's nothing to say it has to be 6 words. It's just, it came from the 6-word story thing. Anyone else got one they'd like to share? Yes?
Sort of a work one, but leave.
Oh, there we are. We've got a microphone.
So leave better than when you came.
Leave better than when you came. Wonderful. I like that. So what does that mean for you?
I think in the workplace, just anyone who I work... Oh, sorry.
It's always funny with microphones.
In the workplace, anyone who I work with or joins the business, I want to see when they do move on to have moved on, taking something better than when they came rather than leaving depleted or in a worse state.
Perfect. So, yeah, again, and so a bit of thriving and flourishing there potentially in there as well. So they're going to leave better than when they arrived. They've grown, they've thrived, they've flourished. You've set them off into the world in better shape. Perfect. I love that. Anyone else? Yes, right at the back.
Help others acknowledge and accomplish their goals.
Help others acknowledge and accomplish their goals. And how does that play out in your work and your professional life?
Well, I think a lot of people mightn't even be aware of their own goals or where they want to go. And I know for myself, not having a purpose or a direction, it's kind of muddy and you're not flourishing. So to help people to get to that point and then to accomplish the goal, because I was in learning development, now I'm in organisational development, it's actually helping them put in a plan to get there or giving them the tools like you just showed to get to where they want to go, and it's individual to them.
Perfect. And so that hopefully then is a statement that you can take forth as your little guiding principle, your reminder of what it is. And for each of you, even if it's just at this point a bit of a jumble of words, you might like to refine it a little, and you've got something as simple as 6 words that help to create a sense of meaning and purpose, a decision point, and a little moment, I suppose, or opportunity for self-discovery. So I hope that has perhaps prompted some thinking, some possibilities there for you to take back into your workplaces. Thank you for the opportunity for me to be able to fulfil my purpose by sharing some of this stuff with you this afternoon.
Thank you, Ellen.